I just want to welcome everyone to the Smartphone Apps and Natural Resources webinar. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Kevin Rohling. I'm a forestry research technician with the University of Illinois Extension Forestry down at the Dixon Springs Agricultural Center in Southern Illinois. Before I begin here, I just want to mention a couple of things. Uh, Questions will be addressed at the end of the webinar, and you can ask a question at any time during the presentation in the chat box. So for audio problems, here's a few possible suggestions if anyone is still having issues. You can change the device. Make sure your speakers are being recognized by your computer. Make sure they're turned on. And there might be a icon under the Zoom app that you might have to select on. So with that, we will get started. So really one of the great things about this smartphone era and the ability to use these smartphone apps is we're no longer required to carry all of these different tools with us into the field, which, as we know, could be pretty unwieldy if you're looking into many different things. So really all you need is your smartphone. And along with the smartphone, a lot of applications are taking the place of these other hard copy resources, such as the field guides, databases, maps. So we're going to go over really a whole slew of different applications that could be used in field studies in natural resources. And there's really quite a wide variety. So I've kind of narrowed them down into a few groupings, and we'll go through them in these groups to kind of make a little more sense of them, I hope. Before we get into the actual apps, so there are some things that you'll want to consider. Are these applications that you're looking into, are they Android or iOS or Apple compatible? Is it region specific? So some apps might be specific to a different portion of the country. Will it work for your area? The data needs. So down here in extreme southern Illinois, especially, we have a lot of locations where we can't connect up to the internet. So does it have the ability to work offline? Storage requirements. So this is one that I've run into on my personal device. A lot of these apps, especially the field guides, where there's a lot of images and requires a lot of data. So that's something you might want to consider as well. And current support, is the app being updated? So in this technological world, a lot things move pretty fast. So you want to make sure you're getting the most up-to-date applications. And in addition, is there a cost for the application? Is it free? Is there a one-time charge? Or is there an ongoing membership fee in some cases? Battery life of your device, if you're going to be out in the field all day, you might want to consider having an external form of power or portable battery charger. Storage capacity. So in relation to what I had mentioned a little bit ago, where some of these apps take up a lot of space. If you have the option of extending your memory in your device, you might be able to add some of these apps to an SD card. Um, I thought this was going to be a way that I could really make use of the external memory, but it turns out that it's not that simple. Um, every time an application is updated on my phone, the device actually puts the app back onto internal memory. And so I would have to go in and manually change the location of the device memory and move it back over to the SD card every time it updates. So I kept running into this issue where I would get all these apps and be like, okay, great, I can fit all these high data apps, but then when these apps get updated, I'd run out of storage space, and it was a lot more complicated than I had anticipated. So that's something to keep in mind. And then finally, the ruggedized device options. If you know you're going to be using your phone or a tablet out in the field, you might want to consider looking into weatherproof or weather resistant and shockproof or shock resistant devices. And then also, of course, just using some sort of cover or case for your device that can stand up to some of those abuses. So, as I mentioned before, this is a pretty broad topic to say the least. I'm going to hit on several that I've found useful or that I thought that others might find useful. I definitely encourage you, if you're interested in these, to go out and do some research on your own, especially if you have a particular interest. Odds are that there's an app out there specific to what you're wanting to do. So to kick it off, we're going to look into a few options for identification, field guides, and then databases. And some of these are integrated, might be identification, field guides, and databases, as you'll see. The first one is straight up a identification guide. So this one is the Forest Pest Insects in North America, a photographic guide. And this is available on both Apple and Android. And it will help you to recognize some common pest insects that are affecting trees. This is a free application, but it is a large data needs app. So 539 megabytes. So that's almost a half a gig of memory, and it can only be stored in internal storage. I came to find out. I thought this one might be something that I could put on my external SD card, but it turned out not to be the case, unfortunately. But the app itself is very useful. Just has a lot of really great images. If you're into seeking out forest pests, it is one that you might consider. In addition to the imagery, it has a lot of information about the pest itself, some of the host plants that you might find it on, distribution, and so on. This next app, this is another guide type app. Um, and this is more almost like a binomial key. Once again, this is available on Apple and Android. It is free, no charge, and not quite as much memory, but still pretty significant. It has takes up 199 megabytes, and you could use it on internal or external memory. So again, this one contains identification information and just information in general about different plants in Illinois. and it works for all taxa of plants. So just to give you sort of a overview, um, this app will enable you to input different characteristics of the plant that you're looking at and narrow down your options for what you might be encountering there in the field. A lot of really good information about where you might find it, photographs, information about the description of the plant itself. And then here's kind of the interface for Illinois wildflowers. So it takes a look at your location, and then you input first off the plant type, and then the flower color, petals. This is, of course, if you have that available. If you don't have a flower available on the plant, this makes it a little more challenging. And of course, the leaf arrangement and the habitat. And once you input all that information, Illinois Wildflowers will narrow that down using its database, and it brings you to the most likely suspects. So it's a pretty cool one, and I've used this one quite a bit in the field. And before we jump into the next batch here, I just want to mention I saw this article actually earlier today with everyone social distancing and self-isolating and that sort of thing. This is kind of a neat thing that people can do while they're isolated. So the next couple of apps I'm going to mention are something that you could either do in your yard, or if you're out in the field by yourself, or even on your computer if you have old pictures. You can upload them to some of these websites that are kind of linked to the apps. So some of these next ones that I'm going to mention are um, linked to web pages, and they have database capabilities, and that's useful to scientists as well as just keeping track of your own lists. And it can be pretty fun. The first one of that type is eBird. So eBird is available on both Android and Apple again. And as the name implies, it is tracking and actually a database of um, bird locations and bird watching and monitoring. Uh, the eBird app itself is relatively low on the data needs spectrum, 42 megabytes. And then the data that is entered into eBird is then verified by experts. So I've seen eBird used in a number of presentations and scientific conferences, in some cases to verify what others are seeing, but there are some studies out there that are making use of this data as well. And a companion to eBird is the Merlin Bird ID app, which is a huge resource and documents over 3,000 different bird species. If you're looking for a bird guide, that is one that you might consider, but that is a very data heavy app as well. So about 500 megabytes. So that's almost half a gig of data. So as far as eBird goes, once you have this app uploaded, it will enable you to open an account, and then it will keep track of your personal sightings, but it also allows you to explore different hotspots that people have set up pretty much anywhere throughout the country. You can find a hotspot and see what other people have been seeing in those areas. You can set it up so that you receive rare bird alerts. So if there's a rare bird found in your area, for example, you might be able to get an alert and go try to see it yourself. And then, as I mentioned, this data is more and more being used in analyses by scientists. So you're not only contributing to your own interests, but also to the scientific community as well. Up next, so iNaturalist. This one is pretty popular. If you haven't heard of any of these up to this point, you may have heard of this one. iNaturalist is very similar to eBird in a lot of ways, but it is free. Has takes up about 125 megabytes. It does require that internal storage, but you can record observations of pretty much anything you'll find in nature. So as eBird is specific to birds, iNaturalist is for pretty much any nature observation that you come across. And it's pretty cool because it crowdsources the identification. So while eBird has experts verifying identifications and things of that nature, iNaturalist uses the crowdsourced community. So they have a system where if three people confirm that species that you've upput or input, then they'll confirm that as pretty solid for that species identification. And again, similar to eBird, this shares with community, friends, scientists. It's pretty fun to just go to the iNaturalist website and dig around and see what people are seeing in your area. So here's some examples of what that app might look like. And then, so here's a list from my supervisor's iNaturalist page. And it shows the locations of all of his inputs. And so, for example, if you came across this tree out in the field, you could snap a picture and upload it, and it'll take data from your location and the image and come up with some suggestions. And you see right here, actually the top suggestion is the correct ID for that plant. So it's pretty fun. I definitely encourage you to check out their website and get some more information about the capabilities of this system. And once you find something, this was just kind of an interesting find. So I looked up what was relatively nearby my location. You could just click on that recent report, and then you can do a deep dive. It gives the description, distribution information, all kinds of information that you can get into um, pretty short order. Up next, I have PlantNet. This is another one that is both Apple and Android compatible. It is free and relatively small, 53 megabytes, but only uses internal storage. This is kind of similar to plant identification, like crowdsourcing plant identification, similar to iNaturalist, but specific to plants. And this database and sharing platform is analyzed by scientists as well. So here's just an example of one that I did a while back. Um, so in most cases, I came to find that it suggested the correct identification within the top 3 to 5 species that it suggested or so. So basically, again, you would open up the app, and there's a little button to either take a picture or upload a picture from your device to the app, and it's um, uh, checks that picture in relation to other plants in the database and comes up with the most common suggestions. So this one in particular was turned out to be arrow-leaved tear thumb, which I was pretty curious about. It had been growing in abundance adjacent to a disturbed area, and I wasn't sure what I was looking at. So this one actually was not the top um, uh, choice, but I was able to use the information that it gave me to dig a little deeper and came up with the correct ID. So this next one I want to talk about is one I'm probably most familiar with, actually. Um, so the app in this case is called Great Lakes Early Detection Network, but it is really a branch of the EDMAPS system. EDMAPS is called the Early Detection and Distribution Mapping System, and it is for documenting invasive species. Um, so EDMAPS is the website name, and Great Lakes Early Detection Network is the regional application that you would use that's integrated with EDMAPS. So depending where you are in the country, there might be a different application that links up to EDMAPS in your area just because they try to focus on the species that you would find within your region. So each region kind of has their own separate app. But the cool thing is that it all feeds into this national database of invasive plants and animals and insects, actually, for that matter. But I've mostly used it for plants. So it's really cool and kind of fun once you get into it. So, in addition to being able to document where you're finding these invasives, it also has a lot of info about, um, could be used more as an ID guide as well. Um, but you'd have to have an idea of what you're looking at. So you might use this in concert with one of those previous identification apps if you're not sure what you're looking at, and then upload that to the EDMAPS or the Great Lakes Early Detection Network. Some of the things that are interesting that come out of this, you can basically, this online database is a repository for documenting invasive species, locations, and spread across the country. You can upload the images, and again, this would be verified by an expert and then loaded into the overall database. Um, you put in your location either using the internal GPS of your device, or um, you can choose this location on a map if you're no longer in that spot. It'll ask you for other information, such as the time you spent there, size of the infestation, percent cover, and so on. With that, we're going to jump into the next section here. So this one will be on calculations, information, and recommendations. And the first one in this section I want to mention is the Service Forester's Toolkit. This one again is available on Apple and Android. It's based on a document that historically was just a hard copy, the U.S. Forest Service Service Forester's Handbook. And it provides, it's basically a reference book with a variety of calculators and graphing options for measurements, volume tables, your chart index, a whole lot of things that you might use if you're interested in forest management. So this probably is a little more detailed than a lot of folks might be interested in, depending on your role, but uh, it gets pretty in depth about a whole suite of forest management options. And so, for example, here we have a graph of white oak and the projected growth of white oak over time. It's pretty neat. You can calculate the expansion of your trees over time if you have some of the variables uh, specific to your site. Stocking guides, if you're interested in using your woods for later harvest. These sorts of graphs can give you an idea of how far how your woods is stocked. So if you're understocked or overstocked. Again, this depends on a lot of specific characteristics to your site. Up next is the soil web application. So this one is pretty similar to another website that I'm a pretty big fan of, the Web Soil Survey. If you haven't used that website, I recommend taking a look at that. But Soil Web is basically just the smartphone version of that. So if you're out in the field, you're curious about what type of soils might be in the area that you're in, the Soil Web app will allow you to do that. It's pretty neat. Probably not something you could do very easily in the past, I guess, without knowing your location and having a soil map along for the ride. Next, we have the fire weather calculator. If anyone out there is practicing prescribed fire, this might be an app that you'd be interested in. So this one will do various observation calculations and will actually save the data to archive it for you if you need to keep those type of records. Um, it will allow for calculation of relative humidity, fine fuel moisture, probability of ignition, um, as long as you feed in current weather conditions that you might be taking there on the fire, it can make those calculations for you on the fly. It could be pretty useful. This one is very similar, although more specific. It's just to calculate the relative humidity. So if you were looking for something a little more straightforward, just with a couple of measurements in the field, you can get your RH. These next couple are in relation to spraying and herbicide use. So these two that I'm going to mention are from Clemson University Extension. This one's called Mix My Sprayer. Allows you to calculate product mixes. and you can create custom lists of your preferred products. You basically add the name of your product and insert the values in the input boxes, and the app will automatically calculate the amount of product to include. So that could be pretty useful. And calibrating my sprayer. So kind of similar to that previous app, but helps in proper calibration, which is very important. You don't want to put out too little or too much herbicide when you're doing this. You want to have just the right amount. So you want to make sure and calibrate your sprayer. This one again allows you to insert a few different values, and then it will come up with the appropriate calibration. And that brings us to the next, and I believe the last section. This one's going to be on the mapping apps, and there's a lot of options out there. I'm just going to go over a few that I've used and mention a couple others that other folks have found useful as well. So the first one up is Avenza Maps. This app uses geo-referenced PDF maps. So basically, the GPS location information is embedded in the digital file of the PDF. And when you upload that PDF to this app, it can show you where you are on the map. You can also input waypoints in the form of KML files and a lot of other things. It's pretty useful. It has its own map store, so there are a couple different options for uploading maps. So the one that is pretty useful to me is the map store. So um, basically it looks at your location and you can search for maps that are available for your area. Some of the maps are free, others you have to pay an amount to use them with the app. So you just have to look into it. Down here in Southern Illinois, it's pretty neat. The Shawnee National Forest has a whole series of maps for the entirety of the Shawnee National Forest. So basically, you can go to the map store, the Avenza map store, and download that series to your device. That would be a lot of data though, so you might want to figure out if you're going to be in a specific portion of the Shawnee, and then just download those portions of the maps that you'd be using. You can also look up PDF maps that are georeferenced online, and then download those to your device, and then bring them up in the Avenza Maps app. Or if you have a personal map. So I'll come back to this one in a second. So for example, if you have maybe a forest management plan, if you're working with a contractor or a state forester or something of that nature, you might have a map of your property. Chances are they've created this map in GIS and they can download it as a georeferenced PDF. So that might be a fun thing to have if you have that option. So just to go back to some of the features, I've used it in the past to navigate. You can put pins down. You can capture points, tracks, and photos from different locations. And you can import or export different file types. So I mentioned the KML, GPS or GPX, and CSV files. All of those could be used as waypoint files to document different features that you're finding on the land or someone else has already found, and you can upload them and then use it to navigate to those points. So it's pretty versatile. Takes a little getting used to, but once you figure it out, it's pretty cool. In addition to Avenza, some other options for mapping. Uh, I've got colleagues that have used Backcountry Navigator. This one is kind of similar to this next one that I'm going to talk about, so I won't get into too much detail, but it'll have a base map and options for inputting points, lines, and polygons depending on the package that you have available. I believe there's a free version, but then there's also advanced versions that you would have to pay for. I believe that is a one-time fee. The Onyx Hunt Map app, this one is one that I've been seeing a lot lately. The neat thing about Onyx Hunt is that it uses information from plot maps um, to show private land boundaries. So a lot of people use it when they're hunting to make sure that they're on the land that they are supposed to be on. And so that one's pretty fun. You can, again, also use the Onyx Hunt app to make waypoints and save locations and that sort of thing. If you have spots that you've gone and checked out and you want to come back to, that one does, I believe, have a ongoing membership fee. I believe you'd have to do like an annual membership fee. There might be a free option as well, but it I don't think lasts very long. And then the last one here is the hiking project. This is one that came in pretty useful for me. Um, if you do much hiking, this one is through the REI store. They put this app out. It is free to use again. And basically, the users are the folks who input these waypoint or these uh, tracks for the hiking trails. And so, for example, I went on a backpack in Missouri last year on a trail that was crisscrossed by a bunch of unofficial trails and actually some other official trails that just kind of went all over the place. And we went down the wrong trail a couple of times and ended up using this hiking project app to get back on track. So that's one that I found to be pretty useful for that as well. And then finally, the last app that I'm going to mention, this is probably more for professional use because even though it is a free app, you really need to also have an organizational account with the software company Esri and have an ArcGIS online and desktop capabilities for to take full advantage. Um, so with Collector, you're able to create maps and databases in ArcGIS online or in the desktop. And then after you've created those maps and databases, you can then collect data with the Collector app. And we've used it to great with some great uses here. I just will mention one project. We've used it for tracking invasive pests and plants, and one thing we did was we used it to execute these roadside surveys for bush honeysuckle. So we partnered with several organizations down here in Southern Illinois, and we broke up into teams, and we were able to go out and monitor roadways within these priority areas of the Shawnee. And you can see that map on the left. All the dots on the left and right side of the map were points that we collected. And then if you zoom in on some of those, you can really start to see some hot spots and kind of cool spots, if you will, of the location of bush honeysuckle. So um, this image there on the right is probably our least infested, and that was in this extreme southeast corner of Illinois. But you can still see where there were bunches of points together, and so we could target our control of bush honeysuckle in those sorts of areas where it hasn't gotten totally out of control yet, and hopefully maintain that in as little bush honeysuckle as possible. So with that, I am going to open it up to questions, but I want to mention we do have a couple more upcoming webinars. Chris Evans is going to be doing an introduction to invasive species on April 29th. And then I'm going to be doing another one on selected natural areas of the Shawnee National Forest on May 4th. And our plan is to keep doing webinars until this craziness is over. So I hope you'll join us for some more. And also I'll mention here that we will have recordings of this and all of our other webinars on the Extension Forestry YouTube page mentioned there. Zach, are you on?
Yes, I'm on. Thanks, Kevin. Very good presentation. I'm going to open up with kind of a Q&A session for you here. We had a very active chat box, so a lot of our questions already got answered by folks in the chat box.
Okay.
Yeah, let's just dive right into it. So question one, will all apps work for the desktop?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I guess it really depends. Like I said, some of those apps that I talked about are kind of integrated with websites that are found online. So definitely not all of them are compatible with desktop. Like Avenza Maps, for example, I know doesn't really work on desktop. It's more exclusively a phone application. But really a lot of them are ones that you could probably access through desktop.
Okay, and so moving right along, are all the apps free?
No, I tried to mention that at each start. I'm not sure how good of a job I did of that. Most of the ones that I talked about are free or have some free type version that might have additional option packages where you might pay for them. So I know like Backcountry Navigator was one that has a free version and then has higher level of operation that you might have to pay for. So really you just gotta have to kind of look at them and see for each one. But most of the ones I talked about are free.
Okay. So this one is specifically for the Avenza app. How do you determine GPS and put it in on the phone? I would assume that would just be, it uses the phone's GPS.
Yeah, that's correct. So it would use the internal GPS and locate you. If you're asking whether it could zoom to a point if you input it, I imagine there is that capability, but um, I'm not sure on the specifics of how that would you'd have to do that.
Mhm. Okay, and just in your opinion, would Avenza be useful to create a tree identification walk?
Yeah, I think that would be an awesome use for it. So you might actually have to create it in GIS initially and then upload it to Venza. Um, there might be a better option depending on your GIS abilities to have a story map of sorts that you might be able to link to online and then people could use as long as they had internet ability to access the internet in the areas that you would be setting up your tree ID walk. Um, I'd be happy to talk more about that sometime if somebody wants to send me an email about that.
Okay, so moving right along, there is someone trying to find an app that they compare with a iPhone fisheye lens to estimate canopy cover. Are you aware of any, and how accurate are they?
Short answer is no. No, I'm not aware of an app that you'd be able to do that with. That's a great question, though. I'd be curious.
Mhm.
Um, sorry.
Okay. How good is privacy on apps, particularly in terms of avoiding constant tracking?
Um, well, I guess I'm not really sure. All these apps, almost all of them, used some sort of location tracking either to enable your use of inputting data at a specific location, or even your objective itself might be to track your movements. So there's definitely some issues with that, I would imagine. It's not something I've been concerned about generally because, um, who cares where I've been walking in the woods? But that is something that, if you're concerned about privacy, that could be an issue.
So this one specifically for the sprayer app you mentioned earlier. You mentioned it calculated herbicides. Does it also have insecticides loaded for calculation?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I haven't personally done much with insecticides per se. I'd have to look that up.
Okay. So we got another question about what is GIS?
Oh shoot. Sorry. So GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems or Geographic Information Science, depending on the context. But it's basically digital mapping, and yeah, um, that's pretty much it. Digital mapping and using. I mean, it in most cases, well, in a lot of cases, I guess I should say, we use GIS to develop databases that are linked to specific locations. So it can have anything ranging from municipality locations of fire hydrants all the way down to um, using aerial imagery and satellite imagery to track vegetation change over time. Um, so it's really a useful tool using geographic data for analysis and monitoring.
Okay, very good. So can you explain a bit more about internal versus external storage? Somebody said that they don't think they have the capability to add SD storage. Their tray only holds a SIM card.
Yeah, that is probably true. So in my experience, I'm not sure 100%, but I know most Apple devices do not allow you to input an SD card or have external memory. So whatever you have on internal memory on that type of device is all you got. And that's true on some Android phones and Google phones as well. There may or may not be um, the option for you to add a micro SD card. But on some Android phones, most Samsungs that I'm aware of, may not be true for all. You can add some sort of micro SD card. So that's what I meant when I was talking about internal versus external. Internal storage, memory storage is on the device itself, whereas the external would be just the possibility of you having that micro SD card.
Okay, we'll go to the next question. Are there any mapping devices or methods to give more accurate waypoints? This guy's been using, hold on. This guy's been using Garmin for years, which only has about 3-meter accuracy.
Yeah, unless you're willing to pay a lot of money, you're probably not going to get much better than 3 meters of accuracy. There are devices out there that will use like ground control points and uh, other towers that help improve the location uh, of your GPS. But 3 meters is probably about as good as you can get with the devices that are widely available. We had some issues on a tablet recently that was way off in some of its GPS location collection data, and we ended up purchasing an external GPS that connected with our device through Bluetooth, and it drastically improved the location of our GPS points, I will say, but it probably is not higher than that 3 meter accuracy.
Okay, well, everyone, we still got some time for questions. So if we have not answered your question, you can put it right there in the chat box, or you can ask any more questions. Okay, Kevin, what was the fire weather app called again?
That was Fire Weather Calculator.
Fire weather calculator. Okay. Are you planning on doing any webinars on only mapping?
I hadn't thought about it, but that's definitely something I would consider. That's one of my strengths in my background. So, yeah, I would definitely think about adding a mapping specific talk.
Okay, so what are your thoughts on iPlant and PlantSnap apps? Have you used those?
I have not used iPlant. I have used PlantSnap in the past, but to be perfectly honest, I believe it was a few years back, and from what I've heard, I think it's gotten better. That's the thing with a lot of these apps that are using images to make identifications. The more people input into them, the better the app gets at making those IDs. So I imagine that those are probably getting better, but I don't have much personal experience.
Mhm. Someone else also asked about Picture This. I guess that's another one of those apps.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it. unfortunately.
Do you know about V-Tree?
Is that the Virginia, was it Virginia Tech Tree ID? I think that one is another kind of um, field guide type app that is more or less a database of identification information. I believe that one could be pretty useful. Yeah, if that's the one that I'm thinking of.
Okay. Now, someone else asked about a presentation about endangered, threatened trees in Illinois and where they're located. We can talk to Chris about that. He'd be an excellent candidate to do that talk. So we'll talk to him about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think he's done something similar to that in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there an ID app that does exotics as well as natives?
I would say iNaturalist would probably cover that. iNaturalist is just kind of a repository for everything, so that would probably be my best suggestion for that.
Mhm. Okay, well, these questions are kind of winding down, so
Hey, thanks everybody. I appreciate you all coming on, and hope to see you uh, for real at some point in the future. All right, thanks.